Welcome to the meeting of the Planning and Regulatory Committee. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for the public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. Please remember your words and actions should be chosen carefully, and members are reminded that speeches are limited to 3 minutes. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and also making a recording. The recording will be available via the Council's website shortly after the meeting has concluded. Other attendees are permitted to film, photograph and record the meeting, provided that it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. If you wish to be filmed or photographed, please identify yourself so that anyone who intends to record the meeting can be made aware. None. To ensure that the recording quality is maintained, could members speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum, and ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. Welcome to all those in attendance. I now ask Ms. Gibbons to introduce all the officers.
Thank you, Chair. So my name is Kelly Gibbons. I'm the Service Manager for Development Management. Presenting items 6 and 7 today is Maria Philpotts. Maria is going to join us online, so she will be on the screen there. Item 8 will be presented by Andrew Banks, and online we're also joined by Georgina Coley, who's our legal advisor, and Katie Jones, who's our, on behalf of the Local Highway Authority. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move to item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence. We have received apologies from Councillors Andrews, Davis and Foxton. Also, at a late time, we've received apologies from Councillor Carwadine. Item 2, name substitutes. Councillor Bartram is acting as a substitute for Councillor Andrews. Councillor Engel is acting as a substitute for Councillor Foxton. And Councillor Phillips is acting as substitute for Councillor Dave Davis. Declarations of interest, item 3. Chair, please indicate if you wish to declare an interest, and I will call each councillor in turn. There are none. Item 4, minutes. To confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of July. Are the minutes of the meeting of the 17th of July approved? Can members please raise their hands to indicate if they are? No, that's agreed. Right. We'll now move on to Chairman's announcement. I have no announcements to make. We'll now move on to the first item on our agenda. Can the public speakers in person for the agenda item 6 join the meeting? Mr. Milne, Mr. Steele and Mr. Gammond, please can you take your seats in the public participation tables? Good morning. And now I will ask you to speak after the presentation. The application before us is land off Green Street, Hereford, HR1 to RB. I'll now hand over to Ms. Gibbons to make the presentation.
Just bear with me, trying to get the presentation to load. Can you? Let's play in. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. Can you hear me okay?
Just checking. Yes. She can only see you. She can see you.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. This item, the application site is located to the north of Bartonshire Meadows Nature Reserve, as you can see on the plan there, to the south of the city centre. Next slide, please. The application site comprises a small area of land on the northern edge of the nature reserve and is accessed from Green Street. You can see the red line rectangular area there just at the end of Green Street on the plan before you. Next slide, please. The application site is adjacent to a public right-of-way, as marked on the plan there, the purple dotted line. Adjacent to the central area conservation area, which is the area in pink on the plan before you to the north of the site. And within flood zones 1 and 2, flood zone 1 is the white area and flood zone 2 is the blue area. It's just slightly into flood zone 2. The site is adjacent to a residential area with residential properties, a school and a church to the north. And to the west lies Cotswold Dairy, and to the east there is a scheduled monument known as Roe Ditch. Next slide, please. The proposals seek consent for the erection of 2 GRP housing units to replace the existing overhead cables and transformer. At this point, I'd just like to clarify, having discussed with the agent yesterday about noise, the agent has brought to our attention that it is the intention that actually only one of the GRP housing units will house a transformer. There will not be 2 transformers, just one. The other housing units will house the switchgear, which enables more controlled operation of the supply network. The GRP unit that's intended to house the transformer will be the unit on the western side, furthest from number 2 Park Street. Next slide, please. The units will be located side by side so that their lengths are visible to the north and south. They will be positioned on a concrete base, which you can see on the plans before you, which will measure about 0.6 metres to raise the units for flood protection. They will measure 3.3 metres by 2.4 metres and have a height of 2.87 metres overall, which includes the concrete base. The existing gateway will be retained, but it will be replaced with timber double gates, and the existing stile will be retained, which is also shown on the bottom of the plan there. The agent has advised that the site has been chosen partly because it was the site offered by the landowner and partly because there is a need for it to be near to the existing transformer so that there is not a voltage drop and to maintain supplies to local properties and businesses. The agent will explain further the justification for the proposals as part of their speech. Next slide, please. I'm just going to talk you through some of the photographs. So this is a photograph looking from Green Street south towards the application site, which you can just see just to the right of the entrance gates there. Next slide, please. And then this is a closer up view of the application site, the same view, just a little bit closer. And you can see the existing transformer to the left of the picture there on the overhead cables. Next slide, please. This view looks east across the application site. Number 2 Park Street is the nearest house on the left-hand side of the image there. Next slide, please. Same view, but looking a little bit more southeast across the nature reserve. Next slide, please. Then this is a view looking back north up towards Green Street from so you can obviously see the overhead transformer there and looking up to Green Street and the public right-of-way. Next slide, please. This is a view looking northwest, which looks more towards the dairy farm. Next slide, please. And then this is another view south showing the row of overhead cables, the existing overhead cables on the site. And next slide, please. And then these are some distance views looking southwest, the opposite way. Next slide, please. So the proposal raises a number of planning issues which are addressed in the main in the committee report. I'll just focus on a couple of key issues. The visual impact of the proposal is understandably a key concern. It is the intention of the applicant to remove the overhead cables and transformer if permission is approved, as they will no longer be required, and officers consider this will be an enhancement to the visual impact of the area. Landscaping will be included as a condition on the application, which will be located on the northern side between the units and Green Street, which is indicated on the plan in front of you there. Next slide, please. With regards to noise, it should be noted that it is commonplace for electricity substations to be located close to residential properties. They are located in many residential areas as they need to be close to the demand. Substations can emit a hum, which can impact on amenity if not mitigated. In this case, at this time, insufficient information has been provided to show what the existing background noise levels are and how the proposal is modelled against these levels in order to determine the level of mitigation required. It is, however, possible to deal with this by planning condition, and the Council's Environmental Health Officer considers it likely that the mitigation will be in the form of an acoustic housing unit. It is also to be noted that the one transformer will be located further from existing residential properties, and the doors to the units will be to the south. All other issues regarding ecology, highways, heritage and flood risk are addressed in the report. The proposal is essential infrastructure required to be provided by the statutory undertakers as part of their maintenance and improvements to electrical supplies. With regards to updates, since the committee report was written updates have been circulated to members. Since the written updates were published, one further objection has been received, which I'd just like to verbally update you with now. This is from the Friends of Bartonsham Meadows on the following grounds. The plans refer to the site of those of Herefordshire Wildlife Trust who have taken on a 25-year lease, and their proposals do not include the features shown in the master plan, which is mentioned in the committee report. This slide here just shows you what is on the Herefordshire Wildlife Trust website in terms of what their plans are, and the green marks on this plan indicate sort of open pathways that will be accessible. Obviously compares to the master plan in the committee report, which shows more features. The response also says that work of the local community to save the site as a floodplain and restore it can be found on the Friends website. There's no supporting case on ecology or wildlife, and given the site's importance, this should be a requirement. The access will be restricted, and a restricted entrance to the nature reserve, particularly for large vehicles needing to bring in grazing animals. Views of the western boundary of the nature reserve and the four poplars and the River Wye and Canary Bridge at the eastern boundary will be blocked by the housing units. Articulated lorries from Cotswold Dairy using the access 4 times a day will create potential congestion. All of these points have been addressed in the committee report. It is not considered that the lorries will cause any congestion or that the access will be restricted for vehicles needing to use the site, as the access widths will not be altered. It is acknowledged that there appears to be different proposals for the nature reserve. The Hereford City Master Plan at this stage is a set of ideas for the vision of the city. The consultation draft was in 2023 and it has not been adopted. It's possible this came before Herefordshire Wildlife Trust's later involvement in the site. The application is recommended for approval for the reasons set out in the report and explained in this presentation. This is subject to an amendment to the recommendation to request for delegated authority to officers as set out in the written updates, for officers just to agree the change of the description of the development to reflect just 1 transformer being proposed rather than 2 prior to any decision being issued. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Philpott. We'll now move on to public participation. Can I ask that Mr. Milne, on behalf of Hereford City Council, speak? You have 3 minutes.
Hereford City Council objects to this application, considering the siting of 2 large transformer units, one of them for switchgear, on a high concrete base to mean an industrial form of development inappropriate for a wildlife reserve. Considering the way such units would blight the remarkable prospect along Green Street towards Dindor and Cap and Aikenbury, members were frankly horrified that they had been proposed at this location. Bartonsham Meadows is no ordinary wildlife reserve, but traditional flood meadows in the course of careful restoration. Meadows that the bishop held as prebendal domain, and before that the patrimony of the early church of St. Guthlac. They were made over to the church commissioners in 1866 for the benefit of the then new community of St James. The City Council shares the view held by the St James and Bartonsham Association, Friends of Bartonsham Meadows, Hereford Civic Society, Wildlife Trust, Hereford Ramblers, and around 100 others that the scheme would be deleterious to the setting and character of the conservation area on the one side and the rurality of the ancient meadows on the other. In this respect, the units, by reason of their siting and scale, are not considered to accord with Local Plan Policy LD1. LD1 requires developments to, quote-unquote, demonstrate that character of the landscape and townscape has positively influenced the design, scale, nature and site selection, protection and enhancement of setting. Policy LD4 requires developments to protect and enhance heritage assets. Policies SS6 and SD1 expect new buildings to contribute to character and local distinctiveness. It fails these two. Effectively admitting the units fail LD1, SD1, SS6 and LD4, your officer proposes a landscape condition for screen planting, but this would only serve to complete the obstruction and undermine the Wildlife Trust's planting plan, which is based upon scholarship and not apology. Furthermore, such planting could not be achieved without the Trust's cooperation as leaseholder. Removal of the existing poles and overhead wires does not form part of the application and is not conditional upon it. The extent to which this may be a benefit is a matter of opinion, but is in any case not relevant to the determination of this application. Neither need we consider land ownership cited to try to justify the proposed site. What the landowner may or may not happen to have offered the applicant is not a planning consideration. Councillors, the City Council considers that this proposal is not policy compliant and is also mindful of the very considerable strength of opposition. Given the identified harms, this is not a sustainable form of development for which a presumption in favour may apply. Refusal is recommended. If such a scheme is to go ahead, there are viable and less sensitive options. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Now I invite Mr. Steele, local resident, to speak in objection to the application. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Just before I start, can I clarify I'm speaking on behalf of the Friends of Bartonsham Meadows and of the St James and Bartonsham Community Association. Thank you. There have been over 100 objections to the planning application, but not a single representation in support. There is genuine and widespread concern about the impact of the proposal. It's not NIMBYism. The community accepts the need for new infrastructure and welcomes the opportunity to remove the overhead cabling. However, the removal of the poles is not part of this application, and the application that has been made appears to be ill-conceived. There's been no community engagement, and there are key documents missing. Where is the design and access statement? Where is the landscape plan? Fundamentally, the development conflicts with several local plan policies. I've only got 3 minutes, so here are 3 examples. Policy LD1, landscape and townscape. The application fails to consider design, scale, nature and site selection, protection and enhancement of setting. It doesn't conserve and enhance the natural, historic and scenic beauty of important landscapes. It doesn't incorporate a new landscape scheme and its management. There is no evidence of thought on site selection and the impact of the development on the landscape on a unique nature reserve in the heart of the city. The scale of the development and its location means that the current views from Green Street, for the meadows and for the hills beyond will be lost. No reasonable justification has been provided for siting it in this position. Why not next to the concrete farm wall some 30 metres to the west? There's no evidence the orientation of the units has been considered. In para 16 of the report, National Grid implies moving the substation a few metres from the proposed site renders it not fit for purpose. How can this be accepted when there are no calculations and no explanation to justify it? Equally, the absence of landowner agreement for an alternative is not grounds for disregarding relevant planning policy. What effort has the applicant made to negotiate any alternative? There's no evidence. Policy LD3, green infrastructure, requires proposals should protect valued landscapes. As we've already seen, this development will significantly harm a beautiful and much-loved landscape and view. Policy SD1, sustainable design. Buildings should be designed to maintain local distinctiveness and respect scale, height, proportions and massing. The combined units, with their concrete bases, are almost 10 feet high and around 22 feet wide, entirely out of scale with their surroundings. There are multiple other legitimate concerns, including noise, health, rights of way, amongst others. Ultimately, you as committee members have to decide this application based on planning policy, and it so clearly fails on that. However, the failure of National Grid to carry out any meaningful pre-application consultation with the community, or even to provide a well thought out and evidence-based application, should persuade you not to exercise any discretion in overlooking its deficiencies. The community urges you to refuse this application and to protect this unique and much loved site and require National Grid to reconsider its proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. I now invite Mr. Gammond, on the applicant, to speak in support of the application. You have 3 minutes.
Good morning, I'm Wesley Gammon, acting on behalf of National Grid. The reasons for the proposal. The network within the area is ageing and at present offers restrictions to modernisation and the drive towards net zero. With more properties and businesses moving towards the use of heat pumps, electric vehicles and solar, the network in place needs to be sufficient to cope with the increased demands. To enable the reinforcement, we need to cross the River Wye to allow load transfer between primary substations. We had the opportunity to utilise an unused private bridge to cross the river into Rotherham area, thus making the project viable and feasible to deliver. On the back of this, we have numerous faults on the overhead lines across the field in question, with a terminal pole across the river in the Putson district subsiding into the river with no way of replacing or relocating. Within the proposed location, we require any proposed location to have a 24-hour vehicular access and be within close proximity to the existing substation. There will also be a further 4 overhead substations to be removed within the area that can be replaced by the ground-mounted substation. The further we go from the current substation sites, we would experience greater voltage drops and therefore would not be able to maintain the supplies to local properties and businesses. We also wanted to avoid any works within the SAM site upon the land, and any suitable location would have to mitigate the flex of flooding. Following negotiations and discussions with the landowner, the portion of land was offered to National Grid for consideration. The proposed installation of the 2 glass reinforced plastic housings, one of the GRPs would have the substation housed inside, and this would be 8 metres from the access way to the west. The second GRP positioned next to the first would have a ring main unit, which improves the reliability of supply by giving us the capability to switch circuits and therefore limit the local properties and businesses affected by potential power cuts and planned outages. The proposed works would mean we could remove the overhead lines and substations, 5 of them in total, from the land, reducing the visual impact and bird strikes. As part of the proposal, I have liaised with the landowner and the tenant in regards to the access way in the land. They have requested that we install new gates, which would create no reduction to size or any obstruction to the access way would take place. Also, the public rights would remain unaffected. We've also discussed the screening of GRPs with plant and hedges and sufficient landscapes, which again we would work closely with the tenant on. I know there are concerns being raised with the EMFs. The proposal of the replacement pole-mounted substation in situ with the ground-mounted has the benefit of additional barrier to oppose effects as we are housed within the GRPs. This would also offer noise, acoustic fiberglass enclosure and acoustic lining to the roof, again negating any noise concerns. If this proposal does not take place, we will not be able to upgrade the infrastructure in place. And at the moment, there are no other site locations that have been offered to National Grid.
Thank you. If now the speakers could please return to the public gallery. Thank you. Thank you. And now I invite Councillor Jennard, who is the local member, to speak on, to open the debate. She has 10 minutes limit. I'm sure she'll keep to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do want to say thank you to the speakers. I think they've covered a lot of what we need to hear, but I will go through it again. I've written 2 pages. We'll see how long it takes. So I'd like to start by thanking the case officer, Maria, for her presentation, for Kelly for undertaking the site visit yesterday, and for fellow councillors for meeting at the site yesterday morning. I'd also like to thank the very large number of local people who attended and for their quiet and respectful behaviour during the meeting. Many are friends of Bartonshire Meadows, which has worked tirelessly since February 2020 to secure the successful transition of the meadows to Herefordshire Wildlife Trust. to create a floodplain meadow nature reserve for the benefit of everyone in Herefordshire. This is an application corrected as of last night for 2 large units, so still 2 units, but one housing a transformer and the other containing associated equipment. These are proposed to be placed at the main Green Street entrance to Bartonshire Meadows in a gap in the road ditch, which is a scheduled ancient monument between the city limits and the meadows. This entrance to the public right-of-way is much used by walkers, giving access to a number of popular routes, the river, and to employment sites at Rotherwas by way of the new Canary Bridge. You will have also appreciated the wonderful view of Dynedor with the hill fort of Aikenbury a little over to the right. This is one of Hereford's most treasured views. The placing of these exceptionally large reinforced plastic units, that's GRP units, has huge impact of this on setting and the important interrelationship between town and country. Nobody appears to agree they would be well placed there, and attempts to cover this fault with the promise of landscaping, although no detail is currently provided, assumed the planting of large trees to screen the units. The transformers are very large structures, so this would be years away, and then with big trees, the iconic view would become completely lost. While more an operational than a planning matter, the application fails to appreciate that the 4-metre gap left by the units and any landscaping may be too narrow both for pedestrians and farm gates, given the size of machinery used by the Wildlife Trust's contractors. There appears to be no consideration made available to us for other site options for the units, and it appears that this was the only site offered by the landowner. Land ownership may be a consideration for the applicant, but it's not a planning consideration for us. Neither is it for us to suggest possible alternative sites, although members visiting the site yesterday may have noticed there are less sensitive sites nearby, well within the voltage reach of existing infrastructure. It is possible to hide such installations even in far more challenging locations as this one. As was pointed out to me, there's a recent installation of a new substation in an old outbuilding by the Booth in East Street in Hereford. So it can be done. The applicant has, at the request of the Environmental Health Officer, recently supplied some noise data, although it was confirmed this morning in the presentation by the officer that this was insufficient. The understanding is that the units would emit a low-frequency hum. While the actual loudness may not be great, there is plenty of evidence such noise causes stress, headaches, and even tinnitus in many people. Given the open location proposed and the close proximity of homes and rights-of-way, the effects of the installation, without appropriate abatement, should not be underestimated. Apart from the noise data, the application is remarkably short of supporting information. There is no heritage statement, no design and access statement, no site options appraisal, no landscaping plan, no public health assessment for noise or EMF radiation, no appraisal of setting and views, no ecology report, and no carbon or climate statement. But we must determine the application on the basis of what we have, and the strong recommendation is to refuse. A refusal should encourage the applicant to reconsider this scheme. Refusal can be made citing the following Herefordshire Core strategy policies: LD1, SD1, LD4, SS6, and HD2. And I will just briefly go through them so members can see why. So LD1 requires development to demonstrate that character of the landscape and townscape has positively influenced the design, scale, nature and site selection, protection and enhancement of the setting of settlements and designated areas. Clearly this does not. SD1 requires schemes to create safe, sustainable, well-integrated environments for all members of the community. SD1 also expects new buildings to be designed to maintain local distinctiveness through incorporating local architectural detailing and materials and respecting scale, height, proportions and massing. SD1 also requires the efficient use of land, taking into account local context and site characteristics. This scheme fails on all accounts. LD4 and SS6 relate to the heritage assets and environmental quality. So proposals should protect, conserve and, where possible, enhance heritage assets and their settings that contribute towards the county's distinctiveness in a manner appropriate to their significance through appropriate management, uses and sympathetic design, in particular emphasising the original form and function. Again, fails on this. HD2 is the specific policy for Hereford City Centre, which states, development should enable the protection, conservation and enhancement of Hereford's heritage assets, their significance and setting, including archaeology, with particular regard to the historic street patterns and skyline. This application appears to fail these two. I consider that the very considerable identified harms are not outweighed by public benefit. At least the applicant is unable to demonstrate that any such benefits cannot be met by other, less sensitive sites. And in my recommendation, this application should be refused. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gennard. You will have the opportunity to close the debate at the end of the meeting. I now invite debate. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is one of those difficult applications that the Planning Committee are regularly tasked to determine. And I think in this particular case, we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't. This is not a domestic development, but it's an attempt to improve the infrastructure of the county, and it's really vital, it would seem to me, to ensure a regular electricity supply, not just to local people but to businesses, and we're told to Welsh Water as well. I think if allowed, these transformer cabinets will be less of an eyesore than the existing pylons, cables and transformer unit, especially if good quality planting is introduced, which is covered within condition number 6. And I think if we can urge our planners to ensure that this particular condition is looked at carefully, I think eventually these cabinets, if it's approved, will be totally screened. And I found yesterday, walking into the site just a few metres, then these cabinets would have been behind us, and then you'll have this complete vista with the removal of those ugly pylons. I can't see why anyone would object to it. We've got eyesores down there already with the little industrial estate to the west, about 100 metres away. These are served by extremely large heavy goods vehicles, and we saw 2 movements there just yesterday whilst we were at the site visit. And so, all things considered, in my opinion, I think we shouldn't be refusing this. This should be allowed for the benefit of all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. We're now Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I think the site visit was very useful yesterday. I don't think I've ever seen a more unfortunate positioning of a necessary infrastructure asset right at the entrance, and as you go down the street, right in the view line as you come. It's quite clear that Bartisham Meadows is going to become something of an important wildlife reserve to the city and the county. And here is one of the strategic entrances to it. And to stick this right in the gateway is most unfortunate, to say the least. We recognise that as we are to drive towards net zero, and the increase of need and demand for electricity is there will need to be compromise. And that's got to be ruled out to everybody. And anyone who pretends there isn't going to be compromise is being economic with the actuality. But to stick this here, right at the entrance to that, I think is wrong. So it's all about compromise, and maybe you have to try and find another site. It says much for the church commissioners that they thought this site was valuable. We have, of course, the emerging planning and infrastructure bill, and maybe with regards to electricity capacity, we will not be able to sit on planning applications like this in the future, and it'll be railroaded over us. With the exception of H2D, which was outlined by the members, because I think this is just outside the conservation area, and I wondered how that that policy actually is applicable to this site. Other than that, I am happy to remove refusal on the basis of LD1, SD1, LD4, and SS6.
Councillor, is that seconded? Councillor Thomas, I caught first. Anyway, sorry.
Can I just clarify something first? Because you've mentioned conservation area. So LD4 and SS6 were the references to impacts on the conservation area. It is just outside of it, but it is obviously potential for setting of that conservation area. HG2 is sort of the wider Hereford city centre policy, which again, it's just on the slightly on the edge of, I think, but it's the wider HG2 policy. So just checking, because you just said two different things slightly there. So LD4 SS6 is about sort of the
Okay, I'll include H2D as well.
Yeah.
Councillor Simmons.
Thank you, Chair. I do fully appreciate that there is a critical need for stable energy, electricity supply, particularly to residents, and the wastewater treatment works. We need those to be continually operational and powered. However, having looked at that site, it is a really key vista. That view as you open from Green Street, from the conservation area, the setting and character, both landscape type and the views across and back into the area, it's vitally important that proper micro-siting is given to those units. I do not feel that this application has been well made by the applicant in terms of the information explaining the need, the reason and rationale for the site selection, why there could not have been better micro-siting. The existing pylons within the landscape are accepted. I appreciate the officer's view that there is a benefit to their removal. I do understand the applicant's view on bird strike as well. I think we always prefer underground cabling. However, we do not have sufficient information in this application to assuage the considerations with regard to LD1, particularly for me, LD4 to a slightly lesser extent, and SS6. I think particularly with regard to LD1, it's very, very clear that it should conserve and enhance the natural, historic and scenic beauty of important landscapes and features. And that vista from Green Street, I'm not sure of the etymology of the word, but obviously Green Street, looking out across there, it's really vitally important to the people of that area. And we've seen that it really informs the context of the character of the assets there. So I'm afraid that I will be supporting Councillor Phillips' motion. I'd like to second that. Thank you very much.
Thomas.
Thank you. Yes, I'm against this application for all these reasons given, and there is. It's a pity sometimes that we can't actually question the people that represent these things. But my understanding of electrics, and I've done it all my life, the voltage coming to that station will either be 16,000 volts or 33,000 volts. I think it's probably 33,000. The voltage drop is minute at that voltage, absolutely minute, over many, many miles. Otherwise, if it didn't, it wouldn't work. So I don't think, and is the removal, although this has been stated, is actually the removal of all the pylons and all the above ground cabling, is that actually part, because it's not actually in the application. So is this been added to the application? Is this a condition of the application? But I totally agree. I think it's the wrong thing. I fully appreciate we've got to have this infrastructure. We've got to put it somewhere. But I totally agree with the other speakers. This is not the right place for it. There are, if they're going to take all these cables away and put underground. They can put this thing anywhere. They can get, permission to put it anywhere. As we all know, they have got way leave system. They can actually go wherever they want. They don't need permission. They don't need to own the land. They can just get it. So I think that we really want to strongly reject this application, and this may make them think of a better scheme. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Engels, then Councillor.
Always forget that bit. Firstly, I'm not quite sure, Chairman, if I should declare an interest in that. I do have a few shares in National Grid, though not enough for me to do them any favours, or let alone them to do me any favours. But I think the crucial point here is this view down Green Street, that the report made a great deal of the fact that the existing pylons were going to be removed. But these pylons, and that would be very welcome, I'm sure, but it doesn't change the fact that the new unit would be absolutely plumb at the bottom of the street in the view of anyone walking outside their house first thing in the morning and seeing, instead of the hills of Herefordshire, this new construction, which is going to be ugly. And we're here not to represent the interests of National Grid, which they can represent themselves, but the people of Herefordshire. And I think we have to do the best for the people who live in that area, with its advantages of ease of going to town, the beautiful view, and the ability to stop at a pub on the way home, owned by a Herefordshire councillor. The key thing in the report to me is that it is understood. This is 1.6 on page 74. It is understood that the site is required, as the new transformers need to be as close to the existing transformer as possible. Well, what does that mean? Does it mean 10 yards, a mile, half a mile, quarter of a mile? They have given no information on this, and until they do, I think we cannot make a decision in favour, having due regard to the need for electricity. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Woodall.
Thank you, Chair. Like I think the other councillors, I agree this is a poor choice of location, and it was discussed in the presentation by the speakers. Mr. Gammon said that four locations in total, transformers will be able to be removed. Doesn't that imply there's four other potential, or three other potential sites, including this one, or excluding it? Sorry, four in total. So why choose this one? And yes, we do need to improve the infrastructure, but I'm sure they could come up with an alternative, and I think it in contravention of LD1 as well. So I'll be recommending refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I say from the chair, I do think that the church commissioners bear some responsibility for this particular situation. The failure, and we've seen it in other cases over the years, of the lack of consideration of the local communities. These assets were acquired by the church commissioners in rather dubious circumstances many years ago, and so that would add to them not only their moral responsibility to take account of the community, but also to their legal responsibility of having account to the community in which they own assets. I have no more speakers at the moment, unless anyone wishes. Oh, Councillor Baker wants to talk. Sorry.
Could I just mention the photographs that the officer put up at the beginning of her presentation? One of the photographs was taken from Green Street, looking south towards the meadows. Would it be possible to have that picture put up?
Yeah.
Because a lot of comments have been made about this wonderful view from Green Street towards these meadows, and when the thing slap bang in the middle is that awful pylon, which you see at the moment.
Yeah. Picture again. I think it would be important to do that. No, no. Yeah.
There we go. That's what you get at the moment from Green Street, is that awful pylon. Okay, we'll get the beautiful pylon. In the eye of the beholder, I suppose.
Yeah. Perhaps in a few hundred years' time, the communities will be fighting to retain the listed. Yes. Councillor Engels,
Sorry, can I just point out that that picture was taken right on the bend in the road, and if you stood only a few yards further back, you wouldn't see it.
right. I think we can resolve that. Can I, it's Phil Potts.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, it just cut out then. But there was a couple of points I'd come back on, if that's okay.
Yes.
Just from all the speakers, I just wanted to clarify firstly with regards to reports submitted and the submission of the applicant. There's quite a lot has been said about the sort of.
I think you just cut out then. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to clarify the reports submitted with the application. Just to clarify that a design and access statement isn't required with this type of application. They're only required for major applications or listed building applications or applications affecting dwellings or over a certain floor area of commercial space. So a design and access statement isn't actually required. In terms of heritage statement, landscape plan and ecology reports as well, these aren't required either with this application because of the scale and nature of the proposal itself. I just wanted to say about the landscaping, it's been mentioned about potentially tall trees. I wouldn't have envisaged the landscaping being tall trees in this site. It would be sort of more hedgerow kind of landscaping that would grow up to a sort of height that would be as high as the existing units, but no higher really. So we're talking hedging, landscaping, shrubs, that kind of thing that would be just sort of screen that sort of hard view from Green Street, but we wouldn't be talking tall trees. It's been mentioned about the removal of the existing overhead lines and not being able to control this. It's true that we can't really control the removal of those overhead lines, but at the same time, there would be no need for National Grid to retain those. So I think they are utilities undertaker. I think we have to take it on face value that they would have no need to retain those overhead cables and transformer if they were replacing them. It just would be wouldn't be sufficient efficient for them to retain those and on the site as well. So there's an element there of having to sort of accept that they would come down as part of their replacement. And then just on noise, just making the point that I think the applicant made, that of course the existing transformer is in the overhead cables, doesn't have any acoustic treatment to it as present at the moment, whereas in these new GRP units, the transformer would have the ability to be housed within acoustic treatment, so giving additional protection from noise than what is probably there at present on site. That's probably everything that I wanted to come back on, but just wanted to clarify those points. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. As there are no further speakers and we have a motion Proposed and seconded. I'll now go to the. I don't know whether any of the other officers wish to make any comment. No. Right. We'll move on to the local member to finally make the have the last word.
Thank you, Chair. I just like to say thank you for the debate. Yeah, much appreciated. Thank you.
That's the sort of speech I like. Now we'll move to the vote. Can I ask the resolution in front of you, those in favour of the resolution that has been passed? To refuse. Those against? One. Okay, that's carried then. Abstentions, abstentions. Chair. Right, then that is carried. Thank you. We will now have a 10-minute break, comfort break for members. Not to have a biscuit, and my apologies to members. Um, can I now ask that the live stream is now online. Can I welcome you back to the meeting? Now, can I ask that the individual speakers for the second item, number 7, St David's Hall, Simmons Street, Herefordshire, extended permission to retain a mobile building on site as a shelter for temporarily homeless for a further 5 years. Can I ask that the speakers, please? There are no speakers. Oh, yes, I'm agree with that. Right. Can we now ask that the officer making the presentations, which is Mr.
Maria.
Oh, it's Maria. Sorry. Sorry, Phil. It's always confusing with this. Yeah. Well, right. Can she now perhaps make the presentation, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This application site is located on Simmons Street to the east of the city centre. As you can see on the plan there, identified by the red star. Next slide, please. The area is in a mixed area of commercial and residential uses. The site comprises the existing mobile unit, which is used as temporary overnight accommodation for homeless persons at present. Next slide, please. The mobile unit is located within a small area of grassland and fenced off around the perimeter, and it lies adjacent to Ben's Close car park. Next slide, please. The unit includes a main dormitory to sleep up to 16 persons with a kitchen and an ancillary office space. There are 2 wardens who remain on site overnight. Next slide, please. The unit has windows on all sides and doorways with external staircases to 3 sides, as shown on the elevations before you. The site is also within the Central Area Conservation Area, adjacent to the Hereford Area of Archaeological Importance and within a SSSI impact zone. The proposals seek consent for the continued use of the mobile units to provide temporary homeless accommodation for a 5-year period. Up until now, it has just been granted a temporary consent for 6 months, but there is now the ability to lease the unit longer and provide accommodation on a longer basis until more permanent provision can be provided. The proposal will operate in the same way as it currently does, providing overnight accommodation only, with daytime access just for staff and to restock, clean and for admin purposes. There are no external changes proposed. Next slide, please. Just talking you through some photographs. So this is the photograph of the existing mobile unit, fronting Simmons Street. Next slide, please. This is a view of the rear, just taken from the car park, looking across to the proposal. Next slide, please. And then this is a view looking west along Simmons Street. You can see the application site and the mobile units on the right-hand side there, the photo. Next slide, please. And this final photograph just looking east, and you can see the application site on the left-hand side of the photograph and the car park in front of it as well in the foreground. The site is within a sustainable location and will cause no harm to residential amenities, the conservation area, highway safety or drainage. Conditions will be imposed regarding surface water and the temporary use. There are no updates, either written or verbal, in relation to this application. The application is recommended for approval for the reasons set out in the report and explained in this presentation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. A statement has been received from Mr. Lane, a local resident, in objection to the application. Can the clerk please read the statement to the committee?
Dear members of the Planning Committee, unfortunately I'm unable to speak at this meeting today due to work commitments at another local authority, and I've requested that my comments are read out to the committee in my absence. The Planning Officer has summarised my comments accurately, and I would like to expand on these details. I welcome the Council's efforts under their obligation to provide the homeless with overnight accommodation. However, I have concerns that the use of this temporary building will follow the same pattern from when it arrived in Simmons Street, as the planning history of the site has been reduced to its most recent, so I will enlighten the committee. The temporary building subject to this application was first granted planning permission in 2010 as an extension to the St David's Hall on the opposite side of Simmons Street for a permitted period of 3 years. In the intervening years, this original permission has been renewed in 2012 and 2018 for an additional 5 years, each leading to, in 2023, an application for a change of use to a temporary homeless shelter until 30th of April 2024, where the use would cease by condition. It remains in use as of the date of the committee, which is a technical breach of the planning condition which the council cannot resolve by service of a BCN as they are unable to take action against themselves. The residents of Simmons Street have become accustomed to numbers of users of the accommodation congregating at either end of Simmons Street, as the facility does not appear to accept users until a certain time in the evening. This has led to, on occasion, antisocial behaviour which affects the amenity of the wider locality, not just the near neighbours. If the committee is so minded to accept the recommendation for approval, then I would ask you to consider reducing this proposed 5-year use to cease on 30th of April 2026. The reason for this request is twofold. It would enable a proper ongoing assessment of the perceived increase in antisocial behaviour in the locality during the building's use as a shelter. Complaints may not have been forthcoming due to the belief that the use would cease at the end of April 2024. Appropriate action could then be considered on a case-by-case basis. It would be useful if a council contact could be provided for any issues connected to the use of the building to be raised with. It would also allow the council to make a proper assessment of the current building condition, its continued use after 2026, and if a permanent building fit for purpose should be either identified for use or constructed, which would be available when this permission, if the committee is agreeable, ceases in 2026.
Okay. Thank you. Just to make a comment on that, most of that is not about the planning application, about the management of the current facility. Right. Members, open it to Mr. Baker.
Local ward.
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. Local member, she has the opportunity to speak.
It's me again. I think this has come to council as it's a standard council application. It needs to come to committee. As we've heard it, the building was accepted as a change of use to temporary homeless shelter at the beginning of this year. It seems to be working, but I would take into consideration Mr. Lane's comments. I don't know if that's a condition or we could put conditions on. I don't know how that works, Kelly. He's requesting a 2.5 year instead of 5-year option.
Unless you think the whole estate is going to be...
No, I think if you wanted a management plan type condition, we could probably seek to do that. But it is in council ownership and it has been council run, so it's obviously within the council's gift in that respect. But if it is something we could consider, so in terms of having a point of contact or further details, but I'm not unsure it might address the concern of the local resident. But it was also something it would just be to provide that management plan for us to look at. But we would be consulting with our colleagues who would be preparing it in that respect. So it's probably best to just provide a contact detail directly to local residents.
Okay, are there any speakers? Councillor Thomas.
Well, this is obviously, these people are hanging around the corner. It's obviously used. It's an essential element. We, quite frankly, dare not give permission on this. We'd look very, very bad. So I propose that this is permission is granted.
Right, is that seconded? Yep, right, that's seconded. Councillor Baker and then Councillor Bolter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All I would say briefly, if any of our members are minded to refuse this application, I just hope they never find themselves homeless. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bolter and then Councillor Simmons.
Sorry, no, I was putting my hand up to speak, Chair.
Yeah, I said, yeah. Councillor.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It was just a question, really. It says temporary homeless. There is a difference between homeless and rough sleepers. What are we actually talking about here? I'd like to clarify that point if possible, because we have a lot of homeless, which are families, etc., put up in hotels and so on. Is there a restriction with this for certain types of people? And are they homeless or rough sleepers? The reason I ask the question is, does that lead to more antisocial behaviour because of the type of person that will be in the shelter? It's a question.
Ms Bolter, do you want to? Philpott, sorry. Ms Bolter.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chairman. To be honest, I'm not aware that there is actually a difference in terms of the intention for use. I know it's for rough sleepers in the sense that it's for overnight accommodation only, and not providing a daytime facility in the general sense of homelessness, if you like. But I can't answer that question absolutely, I'm afraid, but I would anticipate it's for anyone who is in the position where they are finding themselves without anywhere overnight to sleep. Thank you.
Councillor Simmons.
Thank you, Chair. There's clearly a need for this shelter. It has been used, obviously, extensively by population of people who need a safe space to sleep. I am very conscious of the objectors' concerns about the sort of permanent nature of this, even though it's been on a temporary basis and we're being asked to grant another 5 years. I really hope that as a council we can find a better solution that enables people to be safe in this accommodation. I do feel that within the conservation area, if we're looking at this becoming a more long-standing building of use, that we look at potentially some better screening, planting around it, because at present it's effectively a porter cabin within the conservation area. But otherwise, no, I support this application.
Yes, I think, ultimately its positioning and finding a better position is very difficult, bearing in mind that the rough sleeping tends to be based on the city, the centre. Yeah, and I think the council should be looking at finding some long-term solution to the actual building. Councillor Woodall.
Thank you, Chair. For several years I was involved in the church's winter night shelter set up, and I can assure you that homelessness shelter is invaluable for people. It provides bathrooms, it provides a kitchen, it provides somewhere for them to get some advice and some help as well. It's not just getting your head down for the night. There's a whole bunch of additional things that are very beneficial. But we may have been complacently thinking that we just roll over every 5 years, because what's going to be the makeup of the council in 5 years' time? Who's going to be here? They would have forgotten. They'll just say yes, 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 and we'll keep rolling over, and that mobile unit will keep falling apart. And it's a flat top roof, and it's probably falling apart already. We don't know, but it does need to have some. We need to provide some motivation, let's say, for better premises to be provided. We don't want to shut it now, not at all. I wouldn't want it to close now, but I would support a proposal for a condition that we look at a 2.5 year or 2026 as the end time, rather than another 5 years. So I would like to propose that as a way of motivating the council into finding a better provision in the city. As you were saying, it has to be somewhere that they can walk to, and that will provide this essential service for, unfortunately, people who will always need this sort of service. Thank you.
Everybody seconded that?
Yes, they will.
Anyone wish to speak to that particular amendment to the resolution which has been passed? Acceptable to the original proposer?
No, I don't think it is, because I think if we do that, it'll just be brushed under the carpet. I can't see with present council finances that we are going to get a more permanent home, so I would like to stick with my proposal that it is for the full 5 years.
I say it would take longer than by 2026 to actually resolve that particular issue, bearing in mind it's local government doing it.
I agree with Councillor Thomas, but I do think that we need some form of management. We need to know what's going on. We've only had one concerned local resident, which I think that's really good. But I think a condition ought to be put on it that there should be some form of management, and it should be looked at possibly every year. But I do agree that we do need 5 years, because as we've just thought, 2.5 years, 2 years is not enough to find somewhere permanent. Thank you, Chair.
Right. Deal with the amendment first. Is that hasn't been accepted by the original proposal, so we'll deal with that if there is a proposal after the original resolution. Sorry,
Sorry, Chairman. When you asked for a seconder, I put my hand up.
Yeah.
I thought that was for the original recommendation, not for the amendment.
Yeah. Right. All right. Right. Then it hasn't been seconded, so we'll keep to that. Are there any other speakers? There are none. I'll now move to the officers. Ms. Philpott, do you wish to make any before the?
No, thank you. I don't think I have anything further to add. Thank you, no, Chairman.
Officers? No.
No, nothing.
Then I'll move to the local member, Councillor Jenner, to finalise the debate.
Thank you again.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Right, we'll move to a vote.
Just with a condition. The condition of
Sorry.
management.
It didn't have the. It wasn't passed the condition.
Oh.
So it wasn't second.
Wasn't second?
Right. We move to the point that those in favour of the original resolution as passed, as proposed by Councillor Thomas, I think it was, wasn't it? That's right.
Okay.
Right. Can I ask those in favour, please indicate. I think that's unanimous. Thank you. So now we'll move on to the final item. If Councillor Oldfield could, Highfield will move to the local members' seat. Hot chair. Can I request that the public speakers present in person for the agenda item 8, Mr. Bowman and Mr. Leighton, please take a seat in the public participation tables. Right, we'll now move on to item 8, the third application. Can I now ask Mr. Banks, who will make the presentation on this particular item?
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. And thank you, first of all, to all of you that attended the site visit yesterday morning. Very quick presentation for you. You'll see from the first slide that the application site is marked with a red star. The application relates to Ersley Church of England Primary School and is for the erection, retrospectively, of a shelter to be used by early years children. The site's within Ersley Conservation Area. For those members that were on site yesterday as well, you'll have seen that the site is in relatively close proximity to St Mary Magdalene's Church, which lies to the west of the application site. That's a Grade 1 listed church. There are other listed buildings within proximity. And to the east, the industrial estate, which was a former timber yard but is now used for general industrial purposes. Next slide, please.
Can we both do it? The microphones were dropping.
Okay, sorry. So the application site on this second slide is outlined in red. The building, as members will have seen, particularly is within that north western corner of the application site, closest to the main road and the junction with the road that goes to the industrial estate. Next slide, please. Again, that sort of reiterates what I've just said. You can see the main school building in the first two slides, and then again the site outlined in red. Next slide. So as I've said, the proposal is retrospective. It's for the erection of the shelter. The shelter measures 3.645 metres by 2.75 metres, with a height of 2.195 metres to its highest point. It's timber clad with a galvanised steel sheet roof, and as I said, it sits in that corner adjacent to the main road and at the junction with the road that goes into the industrial estate. Next slide. So some photographs of it. The school is a Victorian building. All of its hard surface play area lies to the front of the school, so that area in between the building and the road. The early years classroom is at that far end, so as we look at the bottom of those two pictures, where you've got that gabled bit, that's where the early years children are schooled presently. And some of the members that were on site may have noticed that the playground's actually subdivided, so there is a fence within the school grounds that divides an area for the early years children from the rest of the children at the school. Next slide, please. So one of the two issues really that were raised was to do with highway safety at the junction of the road from the industrial estate. The two photos here were taken by a colleague who was actually the case officer, Matt Nielsen. You can see views looking north and south. So the top one is looking north towards the main sort of centre of the village. You can see visibility is very good in that direction. And from the south, looking south, again, visibility is relatively clear, obscured to a degree by the brick wall. And you can just see the corner of the building slightly further back. Next slide, please. One of the questions that was asked during the site visit was how long the building has been there. It's certainly been there for over 12 months. This slide is a slide from Google Street View, which was taken June 2021. The building wasn't there at that time, but we can see the sign on the fence, and you can also see behind that, if you look carefully, there was previously a structure there of some sort of playhouse that was used by the children. So it's pretty evident that there has been a structure of some sort in that broad location for a number of years. You'll have seen from the report that concerns have been raised in terms of the impact of the building on heritage assets. As I've mentioned, the site is opposite Grade 1 listed church and also within the conservation area. Officers' view is that there are more significant benefits in terms of allowing the building for the general day-to-day use by early years children and for safeguarding issues than the harm that might be caused to those heritage assets. As I said, we looked at some detail when we were on site about issues around highway safety. The thing I would say about that is the building is on private land, and there were concerns raised about visibility. Whether you conclude there is an impact on visibility, that's open for discussion in a moment. But what we shouldn't do is we shouldn't rely on private land to secure visibility from a junction. So whether that building is there or not, in officers' view, doesn't demonstrably impinge on visibility as it stands at the moment, nor should you look, if you were minded to refuse the application on highway safety grounds, nor should you look to refuse it on grounds that it impinges upon visibility, because we shouldn't be relying, as I've said, on visibility across private land to ensure adequate visibility. On that basis, the recommendation before you is to approve planning permission. So with that, I'll close my presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Banks. Now we'll move to the local member who's public speaker. Sorry, we'll move to Mr. Bowman, who speaks on behalf of Earsley Parish Council. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. The Parish Council recognises the importance of the school as a key village amenity and has routinely supported its planning applications as being necessary for it to be both develop and meet compliance requirements. Road safety at the school has long been central to the Parish Council's traffic management strategy. It has been the focus of several on-site meetings with Herefordshire Council's accident and road safety officers, and most recently only weeks ago. Our objection to the shelter is not on the need, but the siting of a large, solid-walled structure on the corner of a busy junction with the A4111, with the exit and entrance road to a busy industrial estate used by large HGVs and particularly long-bonneted agricultural vehicles. Couple this with the narrow pavements, particularly at the junction with the Sawmills Road, and busy periods at the beginning and end of the school day and on church events, we believe this increases the safety risk in this area of the village. The building blocks the view of children, parents and other users approaching the Sawmills junction. Plus, drivers of lorries, tractors and other long-bonneted vehicles have no line of sight until they reach the junction. There's only a very narrow pavement between the end of the school wall and the new structure and the Sawmills Road. Equally, vehicles both trying to enter and leave the industrial estate have a restricted view, and congestion at the junction has seen vehicles needing to reverse towards the zebra crossing. Indeed, a comment by the engineering manager at Highways and Transportation at the Council in a 2016 application that was refused said the access road will not support shared space due to the type of traffic generated. Therefore, safe passage is required for vulnerable users, whether it is for the school, church, or north of the village. Indeed, the wall behind which the shelter is built has been knocked down in the past, raising the safety risk, we think. Parish Council notes Highways has not raised any technical objections. However, the safety risk associated with the area of the school crossing and the adjacent junction leading to the old Sawmills industrial site are well known locally. PC strongly recommends the juxtaposition represents special circumstances and asks the Planning Committee to take them into consideration. The Parish Council therefore objects and requests the shelter be relocated. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. We'll now move to the lady, Mrs. Leighton, who is a local resident, to speak in objection to the application.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Whilst I am an objector to this application, I am another supporter of Eardsley School. It's a vital part of our village community and excels in its provision of primary education. However, I believe that for the overall well-being and safety of everyone who lives, works and travels close to Eardsley School, as well as in it, this particular application needs to be refused and the shelter removed as soon as possible. I believe it is closer to the road junction than the previous less substantial shelter it apparently replaced, and I know that many local residents, road users and members of the school community itself consider that its positioning has created a new hazard for all users of the junction of the side road beside the school with the main road A4111 through Eardsley. Previously, far better sight lines were available for road users and those on the footpaths to see through the corner, as it were, because the school's protective mesh fencing provided a see-through and safer barrier on the corner. The heavily used side road provides the only road access to 25 existing homes, including the bungalows of Orchard Close, but to other homes there as well, and is the only road access for Erdesley's large industrial estate. Premises of numerous employers using articulated lorries and trailers, buses and large plant vehicles, and it also provides access to farmland and orchards. So a lot of essential work and life goes on just outside the school fence as well as on the inside of the school fence, as it were. The junction, as has been illustrated, is only a few metres away from the pedestrian crossing, and whilst that is shown, the photo does not illustrate the situation of the many large, long-fronted vehicles also leaving the side road, but now not able to see pedestrians and small children amongst them, of course, on the pavement in front of the school behind the shelter, needing to cross over that very same side road to gain access on up into the village. Similarly, the construction has restricted sight of and for vehicles approaching from the south to turn right into the side road. Again, everyone's safety has been compromised. Local full-time experience is that the side road is heavily used for access and egress to and from existing industry, farms and homes, as well as by members of the school community itself. The school has no allocated parking for its pupils, families and carers, and the side road is very often used for temporary parking at the beginning and end of the school day. That is a reality that I don't think has been fully illustrated. Unfortunately, I think the school may have been ill-advised in making this retrospective application to retain the shelter in its particular position. Thankfully, the committee has the opportunity to make amends, and I implore committee members, please refuse this application. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. If you could now take your seats back in the public gallery, please. Thank you. Right, the local member is Councillor Highfield. He has the right to open the debate. He has a 10-minute limitation on his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank all the members for going out there yesterday and having a look. My first ground for objecting to the application is that this is in an Erdsley conservation area. This is an ugly brown shed with a short distance, within a short distance of a Grade 1 listed church, other listed buildings, and the attractive Victorian school building. But that would imply that a more suitable design, if that were possible, would be acceptable. But it would not be, which brings me to my main objection, safety. Members visited yesterday will have seen that this is a complicated four-way junction with a pedestrian crossing next to a school. Members have also seen that this is a very busy junction with numerous heavy vehicles using the main A4111 through Erdsley and frequent heavy vehicle movements into and out of Sawmills Lane. Had you been there during school year, you would have seen the children and their parents using the very narrow footpaths or manoeuvring their cars. Displays at the junction are inadequate for vehicles with a driving position a long way from the front of the vehicle, such as large tractors. We saw one entering yesterday, towing a long trailer, and the distance from the cab and the driving position to the very front of the bonnet, which often has weights on it, would be such that when it was just touching the edge of the junction, you would not have a suitable view along the street to the left, along the A4111 to the left. But an important additional factor here is the complication of this locality. It leads to the possibility of a mistake by a driver. There's a lot of things that may distract their attention. Children, parents, prams and pushchairs, pedestrian crossing, cars coming out from both directions. And if somebody makes a mistake, this shed is in a very vulnerable position. As we've heard, the wall has been knocked down once before and would not protect the children inside that shed if somebody gets it wrong. And I think the complicated junction makes that a possibility, not a likelihood, but a possibility. And I think given that it's children involved, this is not something that we should risk, and therefore I strongly recommend that this application be rejected. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms Gibbons, you...
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it might be useful just for Katie Jones from the Local Highway Authority, just to set out highway position before we start the debate, and then obviously she can come back and ask any questions if we need to. Okay.
Hi, yes. The Local Highway Authority didn't have any objection to this application because I think, as Andy Banks has said, you can't rely on private land in order to provide a visibility display. But also, in addition, even with the shelter in place, the appropriate visibility displays are achievable. And I think the applicant has submitted a plan showing 120 metres visibility display is achievable. In actual fact, we'd only actually require a 43 metre visibility display at this location. So even with the shelter, appropriate visibility displays to current standards exist. And in addition, the applicant wouldn't actually need plan permission, for example, to have a large bush grow in its place. So we can't. That's why we can't use private land in order to achieve a visibility display, because there are certain things which are outside of our control. So yes, that's the reason why the Local Highway Authority don't object.
Thank you. I think that clarifies a number of matters relating to this. Right, I open it now to debate. Councillor Simmons.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Mr. Banks for the site visit yesterday that many of us attended. It is very clear that there are issues in this junction vicinity. However, they are existing highways issues. The addition of the shed on the corner there clearly has a need from the school to provide this for a safe shelter for the early years children within proximity. That's been clearly outlined in the report. It was clear that it didn't obstruct the visibility for drivers of cars when turning in or out of there, but I can see that it does obstruct pedestrians, the view of pedestrians coming along the A411 towards Orchard Close crossing there. However, I think there's much more that can be done by the Highways Authority, as in us, to improve that, to negate some of the issues. You know, perhaps 20-mile-an-hour zone, much better signage, white lining, etc., showing that there is the hazard of a school there. I've just looked at when I was on site and again checked on Street View. There's very poor signage, either on the road surface or in approaching that, and certainly none from Orchard Close warning of a school there. So I think we can deal with some of these highway safety concerns that do not relate to the removal of this clearly needed shed. I did pick up the heritage officer's concerns, as with the ward members' concerns about it impacting upon the setting of listed assets. I would like to suggest that there is a condition about staining or painting of the shed to enable it to better fit in with the colouring of the roof, the Victorian school building and the surroundings. I also noted that there are large signs and hedges and bushes on the opposite side of the road at the same distance from the junction with the shed and the wall. So, you know, there doesn't seem to be any issue that way. I don't see why now we're concerned about the visibility the other way. As I said, there are existing highways deficiencies that need to be addressed. I don't think it's being caused by the shed. Thank you.
Any other speakers? Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I think similar to the first application we had, if you're going to put a building in the most ridiculous site, then similarly that's been done here. There was opportunities, I think, within that area to put that building elsewhere, and to put it right in that corner is pretty daft, to be honest, is my own personal opinion. I had the opportunity to, when I arrived, to go up into the industrial estate, and I was quite surprised because I think reference is made to the industrial estate in a village. The size of that industrial estate is disproportionate to the size of the village. You do not normally see industrial estates of that size in a village like Ardsley, in a rural village. And therefore, I think this junction is a very busy junction. I hear what our officer says, but in 2005, the late councillor John Hope, when he represented the area, and myself, had fitted the traffic monitoring figures boxes for the 4 major villages that carried the most traffic in northwest Herefordshire. And I have to tell you, I have those figures in front of me from 2016 to 2023. And consistently, Ardsley has had over 4,000 vehicles a day going past that junction. Last year, it was 4,492. Of those 492, 3,100 were cars and light vans, 767 rigid and heavy vans and minibuses, and 173 articulated HGVs. That is a considerable volume of traffic. And then you accelerate it by the fact, of course, that you've got the traffic coming out of the junction itself. I don't think those issues have been properly addressed in this highways report. I also think that the size of that estate is quite considerable. We then look, of course, at the neighbourhood plan, which Ardsley has, which makes specific reference to improving the safe delivery of pupils to Ardsley Primary School and reducing traffic congestion and pollution in Ardsley. Well, the fact remains that all of us that have got primary schools and secondary schools in our wards will know the great sensitivity about safety with regard to the drop-off and pick-up of children. As you were told, where we were parking is where the parents will park. That will restrict mobility and movement. And all of this is exacerbated by sticking a shed right in the wrong place. Quite frankly, I don't know what the school authorities thought they were doing, or us as the parental body of that school, in allowing that to happen. So from my point of view, I think it's fairly straightforward that that sort of action in a sensitive area like that should not be condoned. It should be refused. And I would give the reasons for that refusal using the neighbourhood plan on traffic policy 1 and traffic policy 2, and taking on board our heritage officer's comments, Ardsley Conservation Officer E2 regarding the conservation area. I believe that it is to allow this building to continue there in a highly sensitive area of a school, I do not think is something that we should adopt as good planning policy. Thank you.
Right. Other speakers? Is that a proposal? Did we have one before? I'm not quite sure.
No.
No. Right. A seconder. Right. Councillor Hamden. Right. Councillor Thomas.
I totally agree with what my neighbours just said. This building is only a wooden shed. It can literally be picked up by 4 men and moved. And I think there is plenty of room on that site to put it in a much safer place. So I think I totally agree with Councillor Phillips.
I have to say that we take some very strong men to lift that shed, I can tell you. Mr. Banks.
Thank you, Chair. There's been quite a lot of discussion about there being a more appropriate site for the shed. I'm not sure that there is. It's quite clear the way that the school is set up. And as I explained, the early years schooling provision is at that end of the school. All of the hard surface play area is at the front of the school. And they have a small area to use for the early years children. It's fenced off, and that's the area that they use. So I'm not convinced by an argument that this says, without somebody pointing out to me where they think the other appropriate location is, I'm not convinced that there really is a better location for it. The school sets out the use of its land, and they have separated out, as most schools do, an area for early years children to use, and the shed is within that area. I think as far as highway safety is concerned as well, Councillor Phillips spoke at some considerable length about vehicle movements through the village. I think it's accepted that Eardsley is a very busy village because you've got the quarries further on to the north, and so vehicles do go through, and they'll continue to go through whether this shed is there or not. I think the important thing that you have to consider is what impact on highway safety that shed causes. You've heard from Katie, she has told you quite clearly that appropriate visibility displays can be achieved in both directions, and that this doesn't impose upon highway safety. She's also reinforced the point that I made that you can't rely on private land to secure visibility. So if you, in my opinion, if you look to refuse this application on grounds of highway safety, I think we're struggling, because you've had clear advice from your professional officer that the visibility displays are perfectly acceptable. The issues around the use of the industrial estate, again, will continue to exist. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that that junction is acceptable. It's not. It's been a problem for many, many years. But I think the advice that you're being given quite clearly is that this shed doesn't impose upon visibility at that junction any more than it would if it wasn't there. Thank you, Chair.
Can I ask the officer to put up, I think it was the third overhead, which is the ground plan of the actual... no. I'm referring to the... what I'm going to refer to is the third one, which is a ground plan, I think.
Where it turns itself off after.
We'll put on.
I think it's important.
Yeah, sorry, it's my...
Bear with us just a second.
Okay, just bear in mind, we have technical differences. Yeah, I'll come to you now. No, next one. And next one. That's the one. That one. That's the one. Yep. I think that's important to look at the actual access and the displays, as it were. Right. Councillor Gennard.
It was just a request actually from Councillor Roger Phillips. Could we have those vehicle movement data again, please?
Yes, you can. Eardsley had last year, and these are the October figures which are used every year as a basis, 4,492 vehicles.
Can I just, so you've said 4,492, but how many is that? Is that per day or for the whole?
Day.
Per day. Okay.
Per day, and that's a 7-day average, I think.
Okay. Thank you.
I just wanted to come in that, as Mr. Banks has outlined, there's been some discussion about how long this shelter has been in place, but it could be up to a year with all those transport movements, and there hasn't been an issue or an accident. Not that we should wait for an accident for things to be determined, but we have had advice about road safety, about visibility of junctions, and it has been in place for a while. That should give us some comfort that it's operating with all of that deficiencies safely, in that no one has had an accident there that's been recorded and put into the papers for us to see. I do think that needs to be. I don't doubt the parish council's view on this, that there are deficiencies in that highways, and as Mr. Banks has specified. But again, I really do think we have to be. We're taking away an asset from the school that is clearly needed. It provides some shelter to those kids from all those vehicle movements and the spray and the noise, etc. And it gives them a space to play. I don't really see how that can be recited within the space. So I'm unable to support the recommendation for refusal that's been put forward.
Councillor Engels. And then you.
I just want to say that when you hear the argument of the parish council next to the argument of the highways department, I think I know which side the public would find most convincing if something happens at that junction. And that whole concatenation of the junction with the school on the corner, the visibility, which I think is certainly affected by, particularly from the viewing the traffic coming in from Hereford into the village and coming in quite fast, and not necessarily obeying the speed signs. I think that there is an accident waiting to happen at that junction, and if it's avoided, it will be by luck rather than judgment. And I would not wish to put my name to what the Highways Department have said, well, there hasn't been an accident yet.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Banks has covered most of my argument, but there's much has been made about road safety, which is extremely important, about the junction size. It's too small for those large vehicles heading in and out. We saw two come together actually yesterday. One large yellow tractor pulling a trailer, waiting to turn right into the junction, and a large cement mixer coming up the lane who wanted to turn left and couldn't. So in fact, the large cement mixer turned right, went further down the road and turned round, being a good neighbour, I suppose. But all this has been made about safety and vehicles. The junction's too small, the industrial estate is too busy. It's got nothing to do with the application before us to retain this early learning structure. There's no doubt that it's an ugly structure, and hopefully we could maybe put a condition to suggest that they maybe paint it and do something with that shiny steel roof, which is pretty ugly. But there's been no evidence, I couldn't see any evidence of any vehicles having hit that structure, and there's nothing in the report to say there's been complaints by the plant operators moving in and out. But again, it's got nothing to do with the shed, and so I can't see any grounds to refuse it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I'd agree with Councillor Baker on that, and that there's a lot of discussion here, and it seems to be a failure of traffic management more than a failure of the school. The school is doing the best it can for its pupils, and we should support that. What isn't working well is the amount of traffic and the speed, the fact that there's a 30-mile-an-hour sign right next to the school, and there's a zebra crossing further up. It should be 20 miles an hour. It's quite obvious. And that's the first thing. The other things are improved signage. And if we know that there's 4,000 traffic crossings going on there, it needs a lot more investment to improve it. There is something, it's a traffic issue, and that's not on the board. As you were saying, Councillor Baker, this is not on for consideration, unfortunately. But so therefore, I wouldn't be refusing this.
Councillor Bolter.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at the outline plan here, there's quite an expanse of land behind the school. Was no thought given to putting something behind the school instead of on the corner? Question to Mr. Banks.
I would guess the answer to that is that the cost, remember that the schools are struggling financially. And, you know, if we refuse this, it will put a substantial financial burden upon the actual school. But having said that, at appeal, I mean, there's more than likely, bearing in mind the advice we've been given by our officers, that it would be granted. Mr. Banks.
The reason it's where it is because it needs to be within sight and sound of the teachers, and the early years classroom is at the front of the school, and their access is onto that hard surface play area, not to the rear. So that's why it's where it is. So whether I can't tell you whether it's whether consideration was given to the rear. Yeah, that's their play area, as in their grass play area.
Right. Further speakers?
Please.
Sorry. Councillor Davis, sorry.
Yes. Having grandchildren and trying to get them off their computers and goodness knows what else, I welcome the fact that there is space for children to go out and play. There are many children now living in flats and high-rise, whatever, and I support the officer in his recommendation.
Right. Are there any further? I believe we have a proposer and seconder.
Excuse me, Chair. Could I just say something, Chair? Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to say that in their decision making, I just wanted to remind members that any cost to the school is not a material consideration, so that their decision should not be based on that issue. Thank you.
I think,
Ms. Gibbons.
yeah, I think we have a recommendation for refusal, but I just want to explore that a little bit further because I hear what's been said about the junction. I hear what's been said about the existing traffic conditions and the overall sort of situation at that point. But what I really need is you to clearly articulate why that shed in that position on private land behind the visibility display is a reason. What is the reason for refusal in that basis? How would you describe to me what the impact of that shed is on highway safety?
I've gone by the policies in the neighbourhood plan, which specifically relate to the improve policy T1 of the Ardsley neighbourhood plan, talk about the improving of the safe delivery of pupils to Ardsley Primary School. Now, clearly, you know, the whole area is sensitive to that, so I think it's highly relevant to say that where that building is placed is causing an increase in a risk. And it talks about reducing traffic congestion and pollution in Ardsley, but I would point to that particular element of policy T1. And in policy T2, it does not result in unacceptable road or highway risks, dangers of pedestrians or traffic congestion pollution in Ardsley. Certainly, I think that it increases the risk to pedestrians, and particularly young pedestrians, children's pedestrians, as they're going on the pick-up and drop-off element. And all of us will have schools, and we will know that we have, and we've heard it, you know, we can put in this, we can put in that. But to go and put this building here and increase that risk, to me, is not acceptable. And I think it relates to those particular policies together with the E2, which is on the conservation area. So that is the reason that I have tied those two.
Okay, so can you just explain, or members explain, so we acknowledge that all of those things are good things that everybody wants to do. They want to improve the safety and everything. So the shed itself, can you just explain a little bit more about what that, are you talking about visibility? Are you talking about, I don't know what that means to movements around. I don't, in terms of, I just need to be really clear about what it is that members are voting on in terms of, you're not voting on the existing traffic situation. This shed is not intensifying, is not an intensification of use for the school. So it's just about what impact this is having on the existing road network and why, and just being able to articulate that to us.
It is increasing the risk of the safe delivery of pupils to the school, which is a direct contravention of policy T1 of the Ardsley neighbourhood plan, and it is also increasing the risks and dangers to pedestrians, which is also contrary to policy T2 of the Ardsley neighbourhood plan.
I'm going to start doing my whiny toddler thing in a minute, but in terms of the why, in terms of by virtue of its siting scale, by virtue of its siting within.
Yeah, by virtue of its siting. I mean, frankly, as in the previous application we did earlier today, you know, that substation up there has got to be placed somewhere around there. It is, but to stick it where it was an absolute, you know, well, just no common sense at all. And similarly with this, I recognise there's a tight area within that preschool block, but it could have been put somewhere else in that small area, which didn't stick it right in the vulnerable corner.
I've sort of kept my powder dry, although I had said that I backed the idea to refuse it. And my basis is based largely on the last point that Councillor Phillips made. I think it could be recited within the area that it is already in by moving it. The area is sectioned off with a fence, and if the shed were moved to the south of where it is, to meet that fence as opposed to the corner that would then be behind it, I think it would improve the safety no end.
I think for me, I acknowledge all of those policies and those good reasons, and also that there has been an issue. It's an area of the county that I've covered myself as an officer for a long time. It's an ongoing concern, and it has been for a very long time. I think for us, when you're writing a reason for refusal and you're making that decision, when you're making the decision to refuse this application, you need to be very clear about what it is you're saying and what you're defending in terms of why is what is the impact of that shed on highway safety. We've heard from the Highways Authority that it doesn't impinge on the visibility display. It seems to be a perception more than a technical side of things. So we've got the technical rules, and we've got a technical officer advising that. In terms of where it needs to be and why it's been cited there, the school's obviously thought clearly about that. Looking at the plans, it's very tight. They may be able to move it over like a foot or so, but I don't think that would have much of an impact from what you're saying in terms of it being in that position. So I think just think carefully about why, if you were defending that reason, and on the basis of what you've been told, it doesn't undermine all the other comments that everybody's made, because there is if there is a highway safety or highway issues in the locality. It's just what we have to, the decision we're making today is what is the impact of this shed on that highway safety, acknowledging the policies, encourage improvements, and obviously don't want highway safety issues to, highway safety issues should be carefully addressed. But you've got all of that information before you, so I don't think we can say an awful lot more.
Can the traffic officer please give the figures as far as the display is concerned, as far as the criteria used for visibility, what is needed and what there is there?
Yeah, the applicant has demonstrated that they could achieve 120 metres along the 4111. But actually, because it's in the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, you actually only need, according to Manual for Streets, 43 metres. So the shed is tucked behind 120 metre visibility display when actually only 43 metres is required.
Right on. Yep. Right. We have that. Are there any other officer comments? We come to the local member. If there are no other further comments, Councillor Highfield.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for everybody who's spoken so sensibly on this. I note that there is a lot of sympathy for the position of the school. That shouldn't be a material consideration about the problems facing the school, because we're looking at safety, and that's the main priority here. And we have not heard that the school could not move the shed. A few feet would make a lot of difference. And I can tell you that for the first few months of that shed's existence, it was not used. It was used as a storage area for junk. It was only started to be used in the spring of this year for children, or at least I haven't seen children in it, but it's got children's play equipment in it. And it would only fit 3 or 4 children and a teacher because it's rather small with its play equipment. But that isn't the point. Kelly has quite rightly said, what is it that concerns you about the safety of this junction? Now, I have to disagree with the highways about the splay. I don't know how they calculate these, but if you're sitting at the wheel of a tractor, you do not get even the 40 odd meters view. But that isn't the point. We're talking about the carriageway and the footway. And it cannot be argued that this does not obstruct the view of pedestrians who might just be walking along that pavement just behind that shed. Or from the other direction, the less than a metre wide piece of path on the school side of Sawmills Lane, which is the side road. That the chances of people stepping in the road or not seeing a truck or the truck not seeing people going past has to be increased. I'm not saying it's a certainty. As we've heard, that we've got through getting on for a year without an accident, but that doesn't mean that there's not an increased possibility because of the more restricted view than there was before. And I'm not convinced that the school could not move this, and a few feet might make all the difference, to be perfectly frank. So I would continue to urge, and maybe Kelly can note, the visibility has been made worse by the erection of that shed. It cannot be argued otherwise. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Now we have a proposal and which has been proposed and seconded for refusal. Can I ask those in favour, please show.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 in favour.
Those against.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 against.
That has been refused. Can I now look for a further recommendation? Yep. Can I have a proposal then? Sorry. Councillor Simmons.
I would like to propose that the case officer's recommendation for approval, but I would like to add the condition to respect the heritage officer's view on the staining and painting of the wood to better match the local area vernacular. Thank you.
Baker.
One, 2, 3, 4 against.
Five. Was it 5?
4 against.
4 against. Abstentions. 2 abstentions. That motion is carried. Can I now thank you all for your attendance? The next meeting is on the 4th of September for site visits, and the 5th, the committee and site visits on the 3rd of September.
We've got to wait for this meeting.